Hey there, it's Kat and this is Brews and Reviews. So today I'm going to be giving you guys a rundown of my 2019 stats. I didn't think I was going to do a stats video. Turns out I wrote down a lot more than I thought I was going to write down this year, but wow, 2020 is stats video is going to be a thing of wonder because of how I've started my bullet journal. Anyway, back to 2019, because I have a lot of stats to share with you guys, so I'm going to share them now. I am not going to do it in any fancy spreadsheety type way because I didn't write them down that way, because I like things right in front of me and in journals and things like that. I'm not massively spreadsheet minded, so I've just got things written down and we're just going to go through them because why waste any more time? So first off, I'm going to go through my 2019 year in books as told to me by Goodreads. It doesn't have all the information that I wanted, but it's got some information and it's a great place to start. So, in 2019 I read 56,275 pages across 173 books, which is the most books that I've ever read in a year before. Ever. So that's great. And actually that was a larger number of pages than I thought, considering I did not actually read that many books that were huge. So I think I got there simply because I read so many books rather than me reading fewer but bigger books. So, the shortest book that I read was 48 pages, and that was The Land Without Stars by Pierre Christin, and that is a Valerian and Laureline graphic novel. It wasn't good. I didn't enjoy it. It was very sexist. It was old, and you could tell. The longest book that I read in 2019 was The Terror by Dan Simmons, and that was 944 pages. That was so worth it. I read that in like 2 days, and I could not stop. It's actually kind of like the perfect read to read in January, which is, I think, when I read it, because it gives you that whole cold, frigid atmosphere of being in like the Arctic Circle. It's awesome. So you should definitely check that one out, even though it's massive. The most popular book that I read was The Perks of Being a Wallflower by Stephen Chbosky, and that had over 1 million people reading it basically, and I DNF'd that one, so that's awesome. The least popular book I read in 2019 was read by only 59 people, and that was The Temple graphic novel by Hernan Rodriguez. It's basically a graphic novel version of a lot of H.P. Lovecraft tales, and it was alright. It was interesting, but it wasn't anything massively to shout home about. So my average rating for 2019 was 3.8 stars, which is actually not that bad. I think I've rated a lot of things 3 stars. I rated a lot of things 5 stars and 4 stars, less so the lower numbers. So I think that it balanced out quite well. I would like it to be a bit higher, but that's simply because I'd like to read more things that I really enjoyed. So, you know, I think it balances out quite well. I'm not sad about my average being 3.8. So that's all I'm going to say on my Goodreads, and now I'm going to tell you guys about some other things that I was tracking throughout the year. So at the beginning of 2019, I wrote down a list of books that I wanted to read by the end of the year. I wrote down 32 books, which it was kind of unrealistic since I'm bad at sticking to long-term TBRs, and I definitely put books on there that I didn't think I was going to otherwise pick up, which was probably why I didn't complete this. But I don't think I did that bad. I actually managed to read 24 out of 32 books, so it's not terrible. But I'm going to go through that now with you. As you can see, if you can see, I don't know if you can see, this was the page that I had set up, and everything that was coloured in was ones that I'd finished, and the things that were blank were ones that I didn't. So the ones that I finished were Nixia Unleashed, Fifth Horseman, Firewall, The Martian, Lost Hero, Indisputably Doris, Bitter Blue, Tomorrow When the War Began, The Cruel Prince, Six of Crows, Gemina, Station 11, The Terror, The Queen of the Tearling, Nevernight, Copycat, The Gunslinger, Mouse, Knights of Dark Renown, Julius Caesar, Warcross, American Psycho, and 13, and Elephant Shoe. Okay, so the ones I didn't read were Paper and Fire, Ink Mistress, The Bane Chronicles, The Wall of Ascension, Kiss the Girls, Unwind, The Colour Purple, and The Raven King. So, yeah. Only some of them are making it onto my 2020 TBR in some fashion. There were some that I just didn't really fancy reading at the time, so I didn't. So I also tracked how many readathons I did in 2019, and it turns out it was a lot. I did 18 readathons in 2019. I did start off with this readathon tracker here. I don't know if you can see. I obviously didn't fill this one out properly because there were 2 readathons that happened in November. Didn't take part in any that happened in December because I was doing Vlogmas, and that takes a lot of time. I'm seeing here that I did like 3 month-long readathons at the start of the year, and then I did like 2 more afterwards, and then I just did shorter readathons, which turned out to be a lot better for me, I think. Oh, except for that, like, November where I did a month-long one as well. I'm gonna see how it goes with readathons in 2020 because they definitely help me read more, but like, is it a little bit too much pressure? Maybe. I'm gonna try and do a bunch of other things, so I may be a bit iffy with readathons for a bit. So at the start of the year, I also wrote down a list of films and shows that I wanted to watch before the end of the year, and I didn't really do very well. I only actually managed to watch 7 films that I hadn't seen before that were on this list by the end of the year, and there's quite a lot more, and there's quite a lot of popular films that I have still not seen, but one day I'll get there. And I actually managed to watch 9 shows, which is better than I expected, because shows should actually take me longer than a film, but I don't know what it is about films. I'm just like, do I have the attention span to sit there for 2 hours and just be like that? Well, probably not, because I like to multitask, and I don't really know. I don't really know why it's so much harder for me to watch a film than it is for me to watch a show, but I'm going to be dealing with that next year, so we'll see. If you were curious about the things that I did actually watch, I watched The Thing, Cargo, What Happened to Monday, Bird Box, Annihilation, Happy Death Day, and Klaus. I added Klaus at the end, but like, if I'd known about Klaus earlier, I would have put it on there, but it didn't exist at the beginning of the year, so, you know, just let me have that one, okay? And the shows that I watched were A Series of Unfortunate Events, The Haunting of Hill House, Sex Education, Game of Thrones, The Umbrella Academy, Chernobyl, The End of the Fucking World, and Daybreak. I also did 25 rereads in 2019, which I don't think is too bad given the number of books that I read and my propensity to reread things, like a lot. And I actually think that's a lie. I think I just stopped recording when I was doing rereads because Eliza and Her Monsters isn't on here, and I definitely read that twice last year. 25 plus rereads. Let's just go with that. Yeah, so this was my unfinished rereads page, in case you can see that. I'll go through this in an actual wider video when I've actually finished this bullet journal. Just got a few pages left to fill in, so yeah, we'll just pretend that was completely filled in properly. So this spread here is actually my real reading, and this is where I took down a lot of the stats that I was doing. So we're going to start off with the genre tracker and see how my reading broke down. So it's not going to equal the number of books that I actually read, because some of them were across 2 genres, and I just wrote them down for both because they kind of counted for both. So this won't be the actual number of books that I read, it'll be more than the number. This year I read 52 sci-fi books, which I was expecting given that there were 2 Tome Infinity and Beyond readathons in 2019, so I was like, yeah. And I read sci-fi throughout other months as well. What I was not expecting was that I would have read 50 fantasy books. I thought that there were much fewer fantasy books that I read in 2019, but apparently I was right up there with about the same amount as I read of the sci-fi, so that's really cool. I read 23 thrillers and I read 12 urban fantasies. Yes, I'm counting a distinction there with fantasy, and I know that means I read more fantasy than anything else, but like, I just see them as 2 different genres. Like 2 separate subgenres, like fantasy as in like high fantasy, and then urban fantasy as like fantasy in our world. So, sorry, that's how I distinguish it. I read 8 dystopian/apocalyptic books and 8 classic books, which, you know, isn't terrible given that I don't actually like to read classics that much. I think most of them were Shakespeare, to be honest. I like a couple of them were, so yeah. I read 16 contemporary books, which, wow, was way more than I was expecting because I don't really like contemporary books. I think a lot of those came around when I was doing Mental Health-a-thon, because a lot of mental health representation happens in contemporary books. I'd like it to happen in other books as well. I'd like to see it more in like fantasy and sci-fi, but a lot of it happens in a contemporary book, so I read a lot of contemporaries then. I read 7 action books, 8 horror books, 4 historical fiction books, 5 erotica novels, and 6 other. So that's things like non-fiction, memoirs, and all that sort of thing, which I definitely only read because of challenges, and I definitely wouldn't have read them otherwise, because let's be real, it's just not my thing. It's not like my genre of choice, so yeah. So now we're moving on to what I call the length tracker, and I basically broke this down into 9 different sections. And we'll see how many of the books that I read fit into each of these categories. So the first 3 categories are about novels. So these are things that I have physically read that are not graphic novels, basically. So, the first category is under 250 pages, and for that I read 19 books. So that's not too bad. It's definitely easier for me to physically pick up a shorter book because I just don't have this weird mental block over it. It starts to decrease the higher the number gets, let's just say. So the next category is between 250 and 500 pages, and for that one I read 24 books, which is still pretty good. I'm cool with that. It's when you get to the next category of over 500 pages physically read, and I only did that 6 times in 2019, which is terrible, and that is why a major focus for 2020 for me is to read books that are over that length. I'm going to try and read them more physically, because wow, I suck at that. The next 3 categories are audiobooks, and they follow a similar sort of line. So the first category is under 10 hours of audio, and for that one I have read 31 books. And next we have the category that basically fills out most of the books that I read, and that is between 10 and 20 hours of audio. And I read 53 books in this category, so I feel like this one wins. For good or for evil, this one wins. Then for over 20 hours of audio, I read 5 books. So again, really sucking at the large books. I suck. And the next 3 categories are kind of like the other category, so this includes graphic novels, manga, and short stories. So I read 19 graphic novels and 14 manga and 1 short story. So yeah, the short story thing, the short story collections are just not really for me, so I totally understand why I didn't really read them. I read 1 and it was literally the last book that I read in 2019, so yeah, it still counts. So basically we've learned that I really love audiobooks, and I need to be better at reading bigger things. And the last stats that I'm going to go through are my sort of audience tracker. So this is basically children, middle grade, adult, YA. So how many books did I read for each? I'm totally unsurprised by the distribution of books that I read for children and middle grade, because they're just not really books that I seek out and go to, and I just don't get as much out of them, so I don't tend to reach for them. So I read 3 children's books and 4 middle grade books in the entire year. And yeah, not surprised. It's just not really my thing. I'll pick up books for these age ranges if there is a certain reason for them, or if I've seen someone talk really positively about it, I'm like willing to pick that up, but it's just not really something I seek out myself, so yeah. I was definitely more surprised about the split of the next 2 though, because for YA I read 62 books, and for adult I read 102. So I really wasn't expecting adult to so far outweigh YA, because I know I definitely read a lot of YA still. I'm always going on about YA, but adult definitely pipped it to the post, because 102 books is like fucking amazing. And I am really happy that that's a direction that my reading has gone in, because I'm getting older and I'm trying to broaden what I'm reading. And I think a lot of that comes from like the thriller and the sci-fi stuff that I've been reading. But then, yeah, I guess all this stuff happens in YA too. I don't know, it was just like a weird split, and I found it really interesting, because I would have thought that it would have been more a 50-50 split, or YA would have maybe gone a bit higher. I don't know. I don't really know what I was expecting, but I think it's really interesting to look at it. Yeah, I love doing stat videos. I'm definitely going to give you guys more stats next year, because I have started writing a whole lot more things down, and it'll be really interesting, hopefully, to watch next year. So if you like this video, please leave a like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!